Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking All Sports. As per usual, I'm your host, Zach, and in this week's episode, we've got quite a few things to talk about. We've got some monumental things to discuss over the week of sport that has just happened, and let's not waste any more time and let's get stuck into it straight away. To kick off the weekend review, we're going to be talking about a little bit of the round game, the Premier League football. We'll start off with Crystal Palace, who defeated West Ham 4-3, which hurts the Hammers' chance of surviving relegation this season. Brentford defeated Nottingham Forest 2-1. Brighton smashed Wolverhampton Wolves 6-0. And I think there's two stories to take out of that result. How good have Brighton been this season with not really much credit going to them? I guess I don't think a lot of people have been really talking about them with Newcastle's rise into the contention for top four and other things going on, like Arsenal potentially winning the title, West Ham and Everton's downfall, and Chelsea's poor and Liverpool's poor form. But Brighton have been absolutely fantastic this this season, and deserve a lot more credit for what they've been able to achieve. And Wolves, this is just a very disappointing result on what's been a pretty underwhelming season for them. Bournemouth, they beat Leeds 4-1, which hurts Leeds' chances of staying in the Premier League even more. Man City were able to defeat Fulham 2-1. Man United beat Villa 1-0. Newcastle knocked off Southampton 3-1, which almost cements Southampton's chances of staying in the league to being dead now. However, they can mathematically still stay up. I believe they've got to win all their games, but as every week goes by, there's less and less games left available to win. Arsenal, they knocked off Chelsea 3-1 with a bit of ease, up 3-0, 35 minutes into the game. It's just disappointing. Like Chelsea, there's been no... I guess it's a squad full of players, great players, mind you, that just don't have a system, that just don't have an identity right now, and don't have a culture really that they can get behind and really buy into, especially this late in the season. I mean, I think they're all thinking about where they're going to go on holidays with their families, or how much time they're going to spend in the sun and what alcohol they're going to be absolutely destroying when they go away on holidays, rather than focusing on trying to finish off the season strong. And I think this is where Chelsea, this is really poor, and I think this is going to be really bad no matter what coach comes in next season. I don't see Chelsea starting off red hot and bouncing back at being a new team if they're going to have this attitude just to finish off a season. I understand it's already been a tough season, got to let them off, and got to understand that these players, the last thing they want to do with how bad this season's gone is to play football. I think they're mentally already checked out and want a holiday, but you want to take at least something that you can be proud of going into next season, and a bit of belief that the group itself will have what it takes to be able to get back into contention next season. Leicester and Everton had a must-watch, incredibly great game between each other that would have helped either one team survive relegation or have a better chance of surviving relegation, or probably ruin and finish off the other team's season. They couldn't be separated though with a 2-2 draw, and that was a ripper game. Like I said, if you go back and watch the highlights, I mean, the Everton kicked it off, started off really well, got the first goal. Leicester were able to get back. Then Jamie Vardy took the lead for Leicester and then almost made it 3-1 and probably ended Everton's hopes of staying up in the Premier League. And then they were able to score towards the end, Everton, and get away with a 2-2 draw. And Liverpool, and now this was the game of the round, Liverpool beat Spurs 4-3 in dramatic fashion. Richarlison for Tottenham getting the equaliser in the 93rd minute to make it 3-3 after they were down 3-0 inside 20 minutes again for almost virtually the second week in a row. Tottenham were down 3-0 inside 20 minutes, but they were able to claw their way back this time and make it 3-3 in the 93rd minute, just for Lucas Moura, unfortunately, passing back towards a teammate of his, not going as fast as he'd like. Diogo Jota intercepts there for Liverpool and buries it into the back of the net and gives Liverpool an incredible 4-3 win, with Jurgen Klopp tearing his hamstring running at the official to celebrate. Just topped off a dramatic game. Now we're going to be talking about NBA, as the first round of the playoffs of both the East and Western Conference have now finished. We've got the Lakers, who are now taking on the Golden State Warriors after the Lakers, for them, beat the Grizzlies in 6 games, and the Warriors knocked off a very impressive Sacramento Kings in 7 games. Credit to Sacramento for the season they have had. Surprised a lot of people, coming from basically rock bottom to flying up to the top half of the Western Conference in one season. They deserve a lot of credit and recognition for the season that they had. The New York Knicks are taking on the Miami Heat, who surprised the world in defeating the number 1 seeded Milwaukee Bucks in 5 games. The Knicks, they knocked off the Cavaliers to get to the position they are in right now. The Sixers, after sweeping the Brooklyn Nets in the first round, they are now taking on the Boston Celtics, probably the favorites to come out of the Eastern Conference now. The Boston Celtics knocked off Atlanta in 6 games to get to that position. And the Denver Nuggets, to round out the Western Conference semi-finals, are playing the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns knocking off the LA Clippers, and the Nuggets ending the Timberwolves season in 5 games. Also in the NBA, the MVP has finally been announced, and congratulations to Joel Embiid, can't say his name wrong, who is a thoroughly deserved MVP for this season. He was absolutely fantastic for the Philadelphia 76ers, and for the last few seasons, you could have argued he should have won MVP, but it's a note to all kids, and it's a lesson to everybody out there that you've got to, as Philadelphia do, trust the process and be persistent. A very well-deserved MVP for Joel Embiid, who is the 2022-2023 NBA most valuable player. Now we're going to be talking a little bit about AFL. We've got some round 7 action to discuss, as well as address the big elephant in the room, and that is Tasmania finally have a team. They'll be coming into the league in 2028. The AFLW team is yet to be decided as to when that's coming into the league. They're going to have a new stadium down at Macquarie Point in Hobart that's going to seat roughly 23 to 25,000 people. There's a lot of talk on what they're going to be called, what's their nickname. Warner Brothers have the copyright and license to the name Devils, or the Tassie Devil. So it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to reach an agreement there with Warner Brothers. I hope so. I think it should be the Tasmanian Devils as the Tassie team in the AFL. There'll be obviously 19 teams now in the AFL, which means it's going to be a bit of a curveball for fixturing with 19 teams. You're going to have one team every week going to need a bye, which will be interesting to watch and see what they do in 2026, 2027, and 2028. Obviously, the 2 years prior, I think that's when the talk's going to be starting to heat up and what the eventual plan will be. But very exciting and interesting to note. Also, big news is there's a new CEO for the AFL. When Gillon McLachlan officially is finished on October 3, it will be Andrew Dillon, his next successor. He's got a footy background. A lot of people say he's just like one of those typical footy characters in not only the media but the football world, where he just loves his footy. He's got a lawyer background. It's going to be interesting to see how he goes. I personally am going to miss Gill's voice on Brownlow night. I believe it's very soothing and it's very iconic. His voice reading out the 3 votes and the 2 votes and the 1 votes for every player and the winner. But that is exciting times. Andrew Dillon is the new AFL CEO. We had a dramatic finish to the Adelaide-Collingwood game, which sparked a lot of controversy around umpiring. Now, I was watching the end of that game, and in my opinion, a lot of that umpiring was pretty poor throughout the game. I think Collingwood did get done a little bit dirty with some of the calls. I mean, the Murphy hit, Ash Johnson high, tackle that wasn't paid. There was a lot of things. Jordan De Goey deliberate out of bounds that could have swayed in Adelaide's favour, but credit to Collingwood. What a win, and they just keep doing it, this team. Coming from behind, almost in losable positions. I think the 3/4 time margin wasn't losable, but Adelaide started off that game so well. You just, as you're watching it, it was like, how are Collingwood going to get back into this game? And they slowly chipped away and were able to and get a famous 1-point victory, which was fantastic as a mutual to watch. I'll get stuck into the teams who impressed me the most this round. We're going to start off with Carlton, who have been a little bit out of form recently. Their loss to the Saints the week before and Adelaide the week before that were talked a lot in the media. They had to go do a job over in Perth and win by a lot, and that's exactly what they did. They won by over 100 points. Charlie Curnow kicking 9 goals. We'll touch on to that a little bit later. Nick Newman was fantastic for the Blues as well, but I'm very impressed with how Carlton have been able to respond to the media pressure and just the pressure from the AFL world on getting back into some good form and winning some important games. I've got a very important one this week against the Lions. Gold Coast are the next team who impressed me the most. I think after their win against North Melbourne, it was probably expected, but to come down here against a Richmond team who would be super desperate to win, fantastic effort from the Suns. That's now 2 games in a row Gold Coast have knocked off Richmond at Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, which I think most people would be surprised in thinking about 3 or 4 years ago when Richmond were at the peak of their powers. So full credit to Gold Coast, 2 impressive wins in a row after that disappointing loss to Fremantle in Gather Round. The next team that impressed me the most is the Port Adelaide Power for their efforts on Friday night against the Saints. And I feel like Port are now starting to string a few games together where they're gaining really good momentum and playing really good footy, which could potentially hold them up towards the top end towards the end of the season. I thought they were brilliant in limiting St Kilda's ability to slingshot from their defensive setup and then get counter with that and get some scores on the board. They won the contest, and from watching that game, it was a really tough 50-50 game. A lot of great 50-50 contests. It was like a finals with the type of pressure that was going on. So a lot of credit to Port Adelaide. A gutsy win. And just a fun fact, in 2022, which was last year, round 7, St Kilda lost to Port Adelaide by 7 points up in Cairns. And after the Saints started the season 5-1, this year, St Kilda start the season 5-1, round 7 against Port Adelaide, not in Cairns, but at Marvel Stadium, and lose by 7 points. So, a brilliant game, I might add, but very impressed with Port Adelaide's effort. And also the Giants, they are included in my most impressed. Like I said last week, against Brisbane, I was very impressed, and I had to give them recognition for their efforts to continuously come back after being 5-6 goals down against a really hot Brisbane Lions team. And I wish I had acknowledged that in the moment and taken it into next week against Sydney and given them a chance. I gave them a chance, but I didn't think they'd get the job done after Sydney were so disappointing against Geelong. I thought they'd have to come back and bounce back against their arch rivals. It looked like they did. I mean, the Giants of Sydney, they were going goal for goal. That was another ripper game where it was close all the way through. Sydney got out towards 20-point lead late in the game and let the Giants come back. And the Giants that never surrender. I mean, they had the never surrender charcoal Guernseys on, and they played that way and never surrendering. And Toby Green, wow, he was very close. I'm spoiling it. He's not a Star of the Week nomination this week, but he was very, very, very close to getting one for his captain's performance, his heroic performance, kicking 4 goals and having 20 touches. Was absolutely brilliant for the Giants, and the Giants themselves deserve a lot of credit, and one of the teams that impressed me the most this week. To kick off the teams who disappointed me the most, I'm gonna start off with the Tigers. I think throughout that game against the Gold Coast Suns, they were probably the better team. I mean, for the majority of the game, they averaged around 5 to 6 more scoring shots and just couldn't kick straight. They couldn't put Gold Coast away early when they needed to. Again, another week where defensively they were great. They still haven't conceded. They've conceded over 100 points only once this year still through 7 games, and they find themselves in the bottom 4. So defensively, there's no real issue with the Tigers, in my opinion. Just forward of the ball, and I understand no Tom Lynch hurts because you don't have that key figure coming out of full forward all the time. That could be really crucial in helping you generate scores, but the forward 50 entries without Tom Lynch have been diabolical, and it needs to change and needs to fix. That cohesion, they've just got none of it there, Richmond, and it's their biggest downfall, which is why they've dropped off so badly. And I have faith in the Tigers that if they're able to address that issue as quick as possible with this young team, they are going to come sneaking up behind everybody, and they're going to make a big late charge to play finals, especially when they've got so many more games at the MCG still to play. North Melbourne are the next team who disappointed me the most. 90-point loss to Melbourne. Now, West Coast are not in here for disappointing because they've got so many injuries that they're dealing with, and they lost by 100 points to Carlton. I mean, with these players coming back, you'd think it wouldn't be 100 points. But North Melbourne, you could almost argue, had no excuses to lose by 90 points to Melbourne. Because Melbourne, for starters, don't think they were getting out of second gear. It was almost like a training drill for them because the effort from North Melbourne was terrible. Absolutely disgusting. Now, I understand Charlie Comden, Callum Coleman-Jones, Tom Powell, all going off injured. But the game was over before Charlie Comden got injured. That's how bad the effort was from North Melbourne, and it didn't look like changing. I mean, it was 50-6 at quarter time, and then it was 81-15 at halftime. They only slowly got to 40 points. They were averaging around 10 points a quarter, North Melbourne. It was terrible effort from the Kangaroos, and I'm very, very disappointed in them, and I don't think Clarko's going to let that slide so easily, and especially when they've got a massive game, a long wait, 8-day break, and they've got the last game of the round against the St Kilda Saints at Marvel. It's going to be really interesting to see that response from a young team who can easily put in a better performance than they did on Saturday night. And the Bombers, they probably go into my most disappointed. Now, looking at it on paper, they only lost by 28 points to Geelong, where Tom Hawkins kicked 8 goals. Jeremy Cameron had a handful for himself as well. But for the majority of this game, they were down by 40, 50 points. And I know they pegged away late, so they finished the game strong, Essendon. But for the majority of this game, I know 5-day break and all this stuff, but Collingwood had a 5-day break and were able to knock off Adelaide. They had no issues at all. They had more injuries than Essendon as well. I'm very disappointed with the Bombers' performance for the majority of that game against the Cats, and they can't afford to start off like they did against Geelong, against Port Adelaide, away from home this week, or else they're going to just get the same response, same outcome of a disappointing performance. However, I do have faith that they won't put in that performance, as I think the way they finished that game against the Cats should be good momentum to take in against the Power away from home. Now we're going to be looking at the AFL Round 7 Power Rankings, and as you can see in this graphic, there is a little bit of movement going on. Port Adelaide have skyrocketed all the way up to 5th due to their performance against St Kilda, and I think that's also a product of their recent performances against the likes of Sydney and Bulldogs. They deserve to go up there and be in 5th position at the moment. So the Saints and the Swans, with their losses, drop down positions. Essendon now find themselves 10th and slipping. They've got a tough task against Port Adelaide this week, but they would be hoping that neither the Adelaide Crows, the Giants, or the Tigers are able to win this week, as I think they would all leapfrog Essendon if Essendon were to lose this week. Richmond and Fremantle obviously go down further, with the Giants climbing up further in the pecking order due to their great win against the Swans, and the Hawks finally get off the bottom of the power rankings ladder. I thought it was a very good performance against the Bulldogs until Bulldogs were able to kick away, but I think with where West Coast are injury-wise now and their performance, I guess, on field and with the injuries they've got, like I said, they deserve to be last. Unfortunately for West Coast, I think they, right now, with what the team that they can field, they are the worst team in the competition, and that's why Hawthorn are able to move up ahead of them, and that is the Round 7 AFL Power Rankings. Now we're going to be getting into Star of the Week nominations. We've got 3 first Star of the Week nominations this week. 3 players who are getting their first ones for the year, and we're going to kickstart it with a guy who kicked 8 goals on Sunday against the Essendon Bombers. It is Tom Hawkins, as you all should know by now. It was a career-high 8 goals for the Tomahawk, who looks to be finally getting back into form after having a foot injury that delayed his pre-season and probably got him off to a very slow start to start off this season. He's now 3rd in the Coleman. He's just quickly snuck up behind everybody and is sitting there right behind Jeremy Cameron and Charlie Curnow, who are level at 1st. He had 16 disposals, 12 marks, 13 score involvements, and as you can see, half of his disposals turned into goals. So a very well-deserved first Star of the Week nomination for Tom Hawkins. The next Star of the Week nomination goes to King Charles himself. No, not the one that's about to become King Charles. Charlie Curnow. He gets a Star of the Week nomination after he kicked a 9 goals 3 against the West Coast Eagles. He really does state his claim now for the Coleman, as he goes joint first with Jeremy Cameron at 30 goals after 7 rounds, which is crazy. He also had 18 disposals, 14 marks. 8 of those 14 marks were contested, and he had 16 score involvements, which was more than the scoring shots that West Coast had as a team. He also, with his 9 goals 3, 57 points, he was able to defeat West Coast by himself, who scored 44 points. It also begs the question, will him or Jeremy Cameron kick 100 goals this year? And if the answer is yes, who will do it first or who will do it? 30 goals apiece after 7 games is quite impressive if you ask me, and is definitely on track to kick 100 goals. It'll be very interesting to see how that goes. I can't wait to track that, because we could find in the last 2 weeks, everyone's just watching Carlton and Geelong games to see who's the one that's going to get to 100 goals or who's going to win the Coleman medal. And the last Star of the Week nomination goes to this Melbourne Demon. It is Christian Petrarca, who was prolific as per usual on Saturday night against North Melbourne. He should get the 3 votes in that game, even though Clayton Oliver had more possessions than him. He had 37. Petrarca, though, he had 35 touches for himself. He kicked 3 goals. He had 9 inside 50s, 14 score involvements, and 16 contested possessions. He had the same amount of score involvements as North did for scoring shots, so him and Charlie Curnow were unreal when it comes to their performances against 2 disappointing performances. And I want to know, who do you think will finish higher in the Brownlow medal? Will it be Clayton Oliver or Christian Petrarca? I think they're both pretty close to each other when it comes to votes so far to start off the season. I think, like the last few years, they're going to cancel each other out come the end of the season when it comes to votes, and hurt each other's chances of winning the Brownlow medal. But I would like to know, who do you think is going to finish higher? Will it be Clayton Oliver or Christian Petrarca? Because right now, to me, they're pretty close to start off the 2023 AFL season. Now we're going to be looking at the week ahead in sport. It's another action-packed week in sport. We're going to start off with NRL, as they've got their Magic Round to go over this weekend, all in Queensland. It's going to start off with the Canterbury Bulldogs taking on the Canberra Raiders on Friday night, doubleheader, because the Manly Sea Eagles then take on the Brisbane Broncos. The Warriors, they'll be not really hosting, but they'll be playing the Panthers, and the Sharks will take on the Redcliffe Dolphins. The Melbourne Storm will be taking on the South Sydney Rabbitohs. The St. George Illawarra Dragons, almost had a bit of a brain fade as to what the Dragons' first name was, will be taking on the West Tigers, who just recently got their first victory, which was great to see for Tigers fans. The Sydney Roosters, they take on the North Queensland Cowboys, and then Magic Round is finished off on the Sunday night with the Gold Coast Titans taking on the Parramatta Eels. Also in this week ahead, we've got AFL Round 8 action kicks off Friday night. Carlton take on Brisbane. That is going to be a ripper game at Marvel Stadium. So hard to choose who's going to win that game. Both teams, well, Brisbane in really good form now, and Carlton looks like they've got themselves back into form with a great 100-point win over the Eagles. Speaking of the Eagles, they play in the early Saturday game here in Melbourne against the Tigers at the MCG. Geelong host Adelaide at GMHBA Stadium, and if you thought Carlton-Brisbane was going to be a good game, this one has a lot to offer as to being a really good game as well. Gold Coast, they host Melbourne in the Saturday twilight game up in Gold Coast. The Giants and the Bulldogs, one of the newest rivalries. These teams hate each other, absolutely hate each other. They will go and battle it out, and up in Canberra. I was going to say something else, but I had nothing else to say. And Freo will be hosting Hawthorn on Saturday night. The Power, they host the Bombers for the early Sunday game over in Adelaide. Collingwood host Sydney in a preliminary final rematch where the Swans knocked off a fast finish in Collingwood by 1 point. That's going to be at the G. That's going to be an absolute ripper. That's 3 ripper games already. And North Melbourne versus St Kilda. That's going to be a very interesting game. St Kilda coming off a loss against Port Adelaide. It's going to be interesting to see their response, especially North Melbourne's response, coming off a 90-point loss to Melbourne. That is to finish out round 8. We've also got some NBA action, more NBA action over the weekend, more playoff action for the West and East semi-finals. Let me know in the comments who you think is going to be playing off in the Western and Eastern Conference finals. And before it gets too late and before you look like a cheat and a bandwagon or a Captain Obvious, who's going to be playing in the NBA finals and who's going to win the Larry O'Brien Trophy. And lastly, cannot forget, we've also got some more Premier League action to look over the weekend as the relegation battle continues to heat up, as well as the title race continues to heat up, with Man City in a very comfortable position at the top of the ladder, still with only a game in hand to Arsenal, who are going to continue to chase and hope that City slip up, which could be an impressive and a very crazy, frenetic finish to a fantastic EPL season. That's all we've got time for this week's episode of Talking All Sports. Thank you again for watching so much. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to do so. That would mean a lot. And please let me know your comments of your opinions on who's going to win the NBA this season, who's going to be finals MVP, and who in the Premier League is going to win the title or be relegated, as well as your NRL and AFL predictions for Magic Round and Round 8. Thank you again for watching, like I said before. And like I said, please like and subscribe. It would mean a lot. And I'll see you guys next week.